Hello, everybody, and welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast here today. This is Bob Gilligan of the Catholic Conference of Illinois. We have the Catholic Conference Hour. It's not going to be quite an hour, though. Here we talk about various subjects, mostly about legislation and issues that the Catholic Conference is involved with at the state capitol in Springfield. But today we're going to kind of take maybe a broader look. Obviously, we get involved with a lot of issues, so we're dealing with elected officials, and how they got there is also very interesting to many people. And so today what we're going to talk about is we're going to have an interview with Juan Rangel. He is now with a group called the Urban Center. Previously, he had been with Empower Illinois and also had run some charter schools back in a couple of years ago. And he's been very active in the Latino community, in immigration issues, and in various education issues as well. And what he recently wrote a op-ed in the Chicago Tribune. It's called How Latinos Found Their Voice in Donald Trump. Obviously, the Latino vote was considerably higher this election cycle in 2024 than it had been in the past for Republicans and for Donald Trump in particular. And that has left a lot of people talking. And so anyway, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk to Juan Rangel. He's with us via our podcast, and there he is. Juan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I mentioned in the outset here that you had written a piece in the Chicago Tribune that appeared recently. I think it was in late November. And it's called How Latinos Found Their Voice in Donald Trump. And it was thought-provoking, and I think it got a lot of attention. I don't know if you've got a lot of feedback. I'm just curious as to what compelled you to write the piece. We can go over some of the provisions of it, but what motivated you to write it?
Sure. Well, I've gotten a great feedback from it, and ironically, I think it's a lot of people that agreed with it, and not to say that there aren't people that disagree with it, but it was meant to be provocative. The title specifically, I'm proud of the fact that I wrote the title. Usually, the Trib won't take your title, but I wanted it to be provocative and to get people out of their comfort zone. What prompted me to write it is that I think, at least through my history, I've been involved in community work for 35 years now. And I think there's a challenge that the Latino has, is that there's a caricature of the Latino community. And my work is constantly trying to change the narrative of Hispanics, the immigrant community, as being one more aggrieved minority group here, or a victimized minority group. But that's the picture that gets painted too often, and many times by our very own leaders for their own convenient motives. I think the Trump election defies all that. When he wins 46% of the Latino vote, and remember, Donald Trump was the one that, as he came down that escalator 8 years ago when he sought out the presidency the first time, he said Mexico doesn't send their best people, they're rapists, they're murderers, and all that. And in spite of all that history, 46% of the Latino community, and many of them Mexican themselves, found their way to vote and support Donald Trump this time around. So that's intriguing to me in the sense that it defies that minority, victimized minority narrative. And it's important to get out there if issues in the Latino community are ever going to be addressed properly.
We have a tendency to divide people. We like to put people in buckets or categories. We have the white vote, we have the Latino vote, we have the black vote, we have other, and we can even go further along that line to lead us into more, in my opinion, increasingly more silliness. When we lump Latinos together, though, are we doing a disservice to really what we're talking about? Because Latino can mean a Mexican American, it can mean a Guatemalan, it can mean Venezuelan, it may mean even Cuban Americans. And I don't know if that's a monolithic group anymore, or is it?
It never has been, but I think it's convenient. And again, a lot of it goes back to leaders in our own community that it's the idea there's more power in numbers, right? So you lump everybody together. but I think it does a disservice to individual groups within the Latino community. But I would say it's even worse than that. We get lumped together as minorities, as people of color. And those are terms I don't appreciate, I don't like. But we get lumped together because there's a narrative that a portrayal of a community that somehow has been wronged. And that's not quite the storyline that I think of why people come to this country in the first place. So I do think it does a disservice to the community. And then you start breaking down the numbers. The Mexican community is by far the largest group, national group within the Latino community. And I think part of the reason why Latinos voted for Trump, and if you think about the immigration debate, which immigration is not always at the top of the list of issues. The economy is probably the first and foremost. People come here for jobs and all that. That ranks high. Taxation is high. But immigration never really makes it into the top five of issues. But if you think about immigration, I think there's a deep resentment within that large segment of Latinos, which is the Mexican community. For decades now, it's been asking for some kind of immigration reform that legalizes immigrants that have come here to work and so forth, and nothing's happened. Administration after administration, whether it was from Obama to today. And then you have this influx of millions of new migrants coming in seeking asylum. And not only are they allowed in, but all sorts of benefits have been given to this community. And so there is deep resentment within the Mexican community as to why now and why not us, that kind of thing. So those are nuances that I think we fail to see. Whether it's as Democrats or Republicans, and how we address some of the issues there. So I do think that we do a disservice to people by just lumping everybody together.
And like you use the Mexican American community as an example. Mexican American community, a probably disproportionately high number of small business owners or working in small businesses. Also, many probably have extended family or living in extended family situations. Generally, probably very high percentage Catholic and or Christian. So their familiarity with the church is strong. So in that regard, I mean, why would that description that I just laid out, I mean, why would it differ from most other communities? Because that's kind of what most people want. They want, like you indicated, jobs. I should add crime as well. I think very concerned about crime, jobs, and opportunity. And honestly, we're on a Catholic station here, talking about freedom to live your faith the way you want to is important too. So, and I think, what the title of the op-ed was, how Latinos found their voice in Donald Trump. He was talking about those things. It seemed like he was talking about them more perhaps than the Democratic candidate, who seemed to have a different message to many people. And perhaps that explains in large part why many people voted that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you hit it on the head there. This community is no different than other ethnic groups that have come to this country for perhaps the very same reasons that the Hispanic and Mexican community in particular are coming here. And that seems to be the problem. We don't see the Hispanic community as another ethnic group. We see it as a minority group. And there's a vast difference in the two. When people come here to this country, whether they're from Poland or they're from Italy and all that, they come here seeking opportunity, right? They don't come here looking for a handout. That's the same thing for the Mexican community. I think for many people, I don't know that their journey here is meant to stay, but they do. They do stay, and their kids grow up, and then after a certain point, there is no going back. That happened to my parents. My parents came here in the 1950s. They thought they were going to come here a few years, make some money, go back, and then live their life in Mexico. That never happened. And why all this is important to the church because this is still a predominantly Catholic community, and the church is it's welcoming. It's something that's familiar to us. When we came here to Chicago in 1970, and now I was born in Texas, and my siblings were born in Texas, but we moved up here. I was still a little kid. The one thing we knew, we lived with a Polish family. We lived in their attic, and we're gonna make do, right? The one thing that was familiar to us was the church, St. Agnes of Bohemia. And it was called of Bohemia because that was a Czech and
Right.
Bohemian community. That church today is a Mexican church. She is now Santa Ines, right?
Hmm.
We've made her ours. That's our church, right? That's our community, and that's what we need to do. Look at immigrants as the Hispanic immigrants, the Mexican immigrants, as that next wave of people that are coming here, and they're going to adopt this and they're going to make it their own, just like the Polish, just like the Italians, just like everybody else, the Irish, and all. And that's where the church, I believe it's an important institution. Uh, our values as an immigrant community is the church's values, and vice versa. And we have to help encourage and push this community to make its investment in their community and in their country. This is now our adopted country, right? And I think what Donald Trump was able to do is speak to those values, right? He talked about the irony of ironies. Donald Trump spoke about traditional family values, where the Democratic Party didn't. The Democratic Party went in a very different direction, a very controversial direction. And I think it's Democrats are in danger of losing that demographic if they don't change course. And I just believe that the church can play a big, big role in voicing those values for this community, because it's an important constituency to the church as well.
It's an interesting topic because it seems like, we're on an evolutionary path here. I mean, we always are, but perhaps we had an event here in November of 2024 that shed some light on where we are, and perhaps that many of those Mexican American families that come here, they've now been here for a while. They're not recent arrivals. And as you're here longer, I think you start understanding a little bit about the political system and the different parties and the messages behind them, as opposed to maybe new arrivals who are not going to vote anyway and probably can't vote. But maybe we're just kind of on that evolutionary path where like my ancestors who are Irish, we've been here so long, we're Irish Americans, but we don't have really any direct relation to the country of Ireland per se. Whereas I think that maybe that's going on now in the Mexican American community. Now you're into the second, third, fourth generation, and I don't know where you put the emphasis on the Mexican or American. And same case with I mean, now most of the Irish in the United States are American more than they're Irish, because they've been here so many generations. And perhaps that's what we're seeing now going on. Maybe that's one of the things that we saw in the election of November of 2024.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. See, some people don't like the word assimilation, but it happens, right? Mexicans and Hispanics are going to assimilate. They already are doing that, right? And I think we saw that with this election, that people felt comfortable voting for Trump, right? They're assimilating into a system here, and Latinos are going to voice their or execute their vote based on their interests, and their interests are very basic. It is about economics. It's about jobs. It's about wages. It's about taxes. First and foremost, that's why people came here in the first place. And there's a criticism of the Latino community in terms of their vote totals. The numbers are not there, considering the number of people that are eligible to register and to vote. The numbers just don't hold up, but it's there. And people ask, well, why don't they vote in the numbers? That's their power. I believe that for people in our community, it's not a priority. And I think there's an education process that we need to undertake. And again, I think that's where the church can play a role. It's the empowerment of communities. It's the empowerment of those institutions within communities. But people don't make it a priority because they're busy working. That's their number one priority. But what I think what happened in this last election, why the increase in numbers and why it went to Trump, is because the two things that they value most are in danger, and that is their money. First of all, everybody would complain about how much everything costs these days, right, with inflation and so forth. And second, it is their values. There was a poll that was done not too long ago about Latinos and attitudes on issues. And the two issues that stood out, at least on my mind, where they differed from the Democratic platform was on abortion and in gay rights. And there is something there that needs to be explored if we're going to ever understand this community. Now, that's controversial. Those are two very controversial issues, but they speak to the values of a community.
It's interesting, and I think that so because they're ingrained with this family values perspective. They grew up generally in homes where there was a mother and a father, and if not, they were grandparents if
Right.
the father wasn't there for whatever reason, or the mother couldn't be there. So I think that family structure is still intact, perhaps more so than like other immigrant groups who have been here for generations, where I think the Mexican family is still very much intact. And I think
Very
that's
much.
where those values are coming from. They understand that.
Yeah.
There's a strong degree of right and wrong. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and how we address issues is important. Right now, there's a lot that gets made and talked about homelessness, right? I guess I grew up in a household where we took in homeless people, I guess, because we always had extended family. I always had cousins and uncles and aunts that lived with us, and that's just the norm. I never considered my aunt and uncle and cousins to be homeless. We're going to give them a leg up. But those individuals are counted as being homeless. That completely goes against the values of how we're brought up. We bring in family, we help them get a leg up, and then they move on, right? And so how we address issues is important. Uh, you mentioned crime earlier. This is a community that's very much pro law enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't hear that enough from our leaders. You and I have been in Springfield, Bob, and the whole parental notification issue of how kids are allowed to have an abortion without notifying their parents. I can guarantee you most people in our community do not even know that the legislature in Springfield passed such a law. This is crazy. And that's why people are turning to whoever will listen. Who's going to listen to their voice? And in November elections, Donald Trump happened to be that person.
Where does it go from here? Does this trend continue, or does the Democratic Party get the message and start talking more about those meat and potato issues that have been the characteristic and hallmark of the Democratic Party? It's still there in the Democratic Party, but they seem to be the kids in the corner of the room right now. The union voice, the rights to organize, things like that. That's still there, but it just seems like there's so many other issues that have clouded the Democratic agenda right now. Is it a matter of getting their messaging and their issues? Well, here's my question: is it a matter of getting the message right, or the issues right, or is it a little bit of both?
What's addressing the issues? It can't not be window dressing, right? And I'll tell you, I hear this all the time. People tell me, "You sound like a Republican. Why don't you become a Republican?"
Who would say that?
I'm really not. I am a Democrat. I'm an old Reagan Democrat. Those guys, those long forgotten souls. But I just believe this is where my community stands. And everything that I'm saying, I can guarantee you, these issues poll very, very well in the Latino community. Um, I I would hope that the Democratic Party would pay attention and try to figure it out. I have my doubts because this is a battle that I've been dealing with for some time now. Um, I will caution the Republican Party that this vote for Trump was exactly that. It was a vote for Trump, not a vote for the Republican Party. But therein lies the opportunity for the Republicans to also try to wean over Latino votes over to the Republican Party for the long haul. And it's up to the Democrats to moderate their positions that so it doesn't lose. And I think the winner, if both parties are trying to attract this community's vote, is the Latino community. But it can't be window dressing. It has to be real.
I agree with you, Juan. I think it was Trump. It's his personality, it was his messaging, it's his ability to cut through all the noise out there and go right to a message that people understood. It was pretty clear, it's pretty simple. And a lot of people don't like that, but I think as we've shown in your piece and by the voting data that, well, a number of people did enough that now the Democrats need to pay attention. But will it have lasting staying power? Time will tell. I don't know. And it's interesting also to look at like where this is happening. It's basically in the cities, I think, are the interesting part here. The major urban centers. I was reading the other day that there's 215 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, that 85 of them are from 4 states: California, Illinois, New York, and Massachusetts. So it shows you, there's reason to be concerned here. You start eating into those numbers, and you could be a significant minority party pretty quickly.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you, and you asked what do we need to do? And I think certainly in terms of the church, because again, this is still a predominantly Catholic community. I think there's an opportunity for the church to exert its role on behalf and with this community as well, because we share those values. Our community shares those Catholic values. And I think it's years ago, maybe three decades ago now, we partnered very closely with the Catholic Church in Chicago to promote the idea of citizenship, becoming an American citizen. And it was very successful. Mm-hmm. We were able to get tens of thousands of Latinos to become American citizens through that process. I think the church, because it has a moral authority, also should engage in encouraging its parishioners to register to vote and to vote. And I think the church sometimes gets a little bit squeamish of getting close to the political line. But I think it is the church's position that the church has a moral obligation to encourage people to get involved, actively involved in their politics, in the community's politics. And I would hope that the church would become active in getting people registered to vote and voting, because that's what ultimately will change public policy that will reflect our values as a church and our values as a community as well.
Great. Thanks so much, Juan. Very insightful, very thoughtful, interesting times. Thanks for writing the piece, and it was a pleasure reading it and being able to sort of look at it and think about it, digest it, and talk about it further, even here a month later. Thanks so much for joining us here today to talk about the impact of Latino communities. This is Bob Gilligan. Thanks for listening to our podcast. We will be back again with another podcast fairly soon, and do it in a couple more weeks. Go to the Chicago Tribune website. It's called How Latinos Found Their Voice in Donald Trump. It's on the Chicago Tribune website in the op-ed section. It appeared on November 22nd. Thanks for joining in, and we'll be back to do another podcast very briefly.